Get into House of Flame and Shadow. This is the third book out of 4 in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. If you have not read books 1 and 2, Earth and Blood and Sky and Breath, please go read those first. This is not a standalone. This is literally the conclusion, in my opinion, to a series. You need to read book 1 and 2 first. I've warned you. All right, while we won't be getting into spoilers, I will give you a summary of the book, things I'd like you to note, the setting, where we left off after book 2, what we're getting into in book 3, my personal thoughts, and my personal rating. I'm going to start with this summary that wasn't written by me, but was definitely shortened by me. So, Bryce Quinlan never expected to see a world other than Midgard, but now that she has, all she wants is to get back. Stranded in a strange new world, she's going to need all her wits about her to get back home. Hunt Athlar has found himself in some deep holes in his life, but this one might be the deepest of all. He's desperate to help Bryce, but until he can escape the Astery's leash, his hands are quite literally tied. So, things to note, it takes 600 pages for Bryce to say alpha hole. I think we can all appreciate that because book 1 and 2, it was just overused and started to get a little redundant. So I wanted to keep that in mind if you're diving into this book. 600 pages without that word. This book does have a happily ever after ending, so you don't have to freak out about cliffhangers. I know I mentioned at the end of the review for book 2 is that I was really hoping this book wasn't a cliffhanger because book 4 isn't set to come out at all in 2024, which means I have at least a year of waiting. And no cliffhanger. Very much feels like a conclusion. Like, that's the best way I can describe this book, is this book feels like a conclusion. Apparently the 4th book is Bryce's conclusion, but I'm happy with where this book ended. There's like 2 loose strings. That's it. Once again, the book is broken down into 3 parts: the drop, the search, the ascent. If you have read the other books, then you know this is the process that people in Midgard go through to gain full access to their powers. The drop, the search, and then they ascend back up and they have their full powers and immortality as best as one can have. But where we left off in book 2, Bryce had just jumped into a new world looking for hell. Finds out she's in Prynthian, which is the world from A Court of Thorns and Roses. Blah, such a mouthful. And that's where she is. And then, of course, Hunt, Baxian, and Rune are left behind with the Astery, and they end up in the dungeon being tortured by Hawk and the Hammer, while the Hind, who is Lydia, kind of surveys because obviously there's some bias for her with Rune. Personally, I really wasn't impressed with how Bryce handled her time in Prynthian. She has been a loudmouth throughout the books, let's be real. But she had the ability to be polite before, and I feel like when she goes into this other world, she was just straight abrasive. And, like, you're the representation of someone else from another planet for the entire planet, and you're basically making Midgard seem like it's full of assholes. I just didn't understand her approach, her actions when she was in the other world. That's kind of a spoiler. She does go home. But I wasn't impressed with her in that world. You have to get through all of part 1 to see everybody come back together. Part 2 is when the gang comes back together. And I'll be honest, the reunion was a little anticlimactic. And it kind of got overshadowed by other things, which is fair. This book was like full steam ahead on the plot and didn't give as much time as I would have liked to character development, to some of the side plots that had been developing. It was like, we're going for the main plot and that's it, and we're gonna everything will get tied up together so that we can get to the end. I do like that the loose ends were tied up. It was so great to not end with all the loose ends like I left in book two. Book two, I left really unsatisfied. I left sitting there like, you started so many side plots and closed none of them. So book three will be more satisfying. It does feel, like I said, like a conclusion, but there wasn't as much development as I personally would have liked. So on that note, my personal thoughts is that I wanted more. I had really mixed feelings going into this book because I did not like book two, even though I absolutely loved book one. I also had some friends that had bought this book on pre-sale, like as soon as it came out, read it before me, and their comments had all been about how slow it had been to read, that it just wasn't captivating like some of the other books, like it could have been for a third in a series that we were all waiting for. I wasn't waiting for it, but everyone else was. I just felt like there was a lot of time on summary moments, because so many people were spread apart in different places, different things happening. It was like, okay, we're back together. Okay, let's summarize everything that happened with you. And not that they said like the whole story again each time, but that it was like, okay, after we told them the story, then there was their reaction. And then they told us their story. And then there was our reaction. And then there were our questions. And it just wasn't exciting. Both Ethan and Tharian's storylines for me fell completely flat. Tharian continued to be himself, which means he just continued to go downhill. And Ethan's situation, honestly, for me, was predicted in book one. It was no surprise, saw it coming a mile away, was literally just waiting for it to happen. So when it happened, it was like, like there was no surprises to it. I feel like most of the ending had no surprises for me. Like I said, like the plot line was full steam ahead, and they got to the ending of the story like they wanted to. The only surprises throughout the entire book for me were Jessica, I don't know if that's how you say it, and Lydia's lives. Those were the only things that I couldn't have predicted and didn't see coming, and I liked it. Lydia, literally right up there with Rune for me. Favorite couple, favorite people in the whole book. If I was the type of person who could skim ahead without getting FOMO, I would skim ahead for Lydia and Rune because I wanted more them time and less Bryce, Hunt, Tharian, Ethan time. They just didn't do it for me. Like I mentioned before, I have not read the other series by Sarah J. Maas. I have not read Throne of Glass series or A Court of Thorns and Roses. I have read A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury, but I haven't read the rest of the series. So I do know from reading other people's comments and reviews that this book is in between two of the A Court of Thorns and Roses books, but I can't comment on that part of the storyline as I haven't read those. There is a whole lot of history revealed in terms of Prynthian, the other planet, and that whole realm, Riseland's world. So if you are into those books, I'm sure this is great and satisfying for you. For me, it was a little bit slow and long. They were really drawn out, and I was kind of waiting for the ending when it gave the relevant parts to this series. So if I was to rate the book, I would once again give it a 3.5. It's not that I didn't like it. It's not that it was a bad book. I just think in terms of character development, in terms of interest, intrigue, captivation, it just wasn't there for me. I read it because I wanted to know what happened more than like I was obsessive and needed to know what happened, if that makes sense. If I was to rate the books in order that I like them, it would be book one, book three, and then book two. So there is that. It came above book two. If you have read the book, please let me know. Drop in the comments what you thought. Were you happy with the conclusions? Was there something missing for you? Did Bryce go downhill for you as well? Because she just, I didn't like her and Hunt in this book. It was a little upsetting that I didn't like the main character couple. Also, when did they get married? I don't remember them getting married. Anyways, I would love to hear all your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns down in the comment box. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again soon.